Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Seth.
And I'm Zach.
And we're the Classic Gaming Brothers.
We are the Classic Gaming Brothers.
That's right.
That's right.
It sounds like the out. And we're done. Let's wrap it up.
I wanted to say something different than that's right. So that's why I was like, I gotta say something different. Because I always say it. And then you said it anyway.
And then I said it anyway.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Classic Gaming Brothers.
All right.
Anyway, we'll get in. All right. So if you're joining us for the first time, that was probably one of our worst intros. But we break our podcast down into three segments. We have our recently played games, where we talk about games that we've been recently playing. We have our middle segment, which we talk about our topic of the week, and then we have our Buy Way Pass segment. That's at the end of the show, where we talk about what we're excited about buying, waiting, or passing on. So Zach, what have you been recently been playing?
Yeah, so I'm laughing.
Are you still laughing from the intro?
No, I'm laughing because I know what I've been recently playing.
That's fair.
I've been recently playing a game that, for some context, and as we've discussed before in previous episodes, our father liked to pick up a lot of, I would say, budget titles from places like Buck a Book and Ocean State Job Lot and places like that. And every now and then he would bring home demo discs. And Seth and I have discussed this. We're probably going to do a full episode on demo discs someday because we have a lot of memories of demo discs.
Most of our games were demo disc games that we never got to see the end of.
Exactly. So I figured I remembered one of the games that I played on a demo disc, and I decided I was going to download a copy of it and get it to run on my modern computer, which I was able to do with some difficulty, but I got it done. And that is a game called Hype the Time Quest. So Hype the Time Quest was developed by Ubisoft Montreal, published by Ubisoft, and is a licensed game for the Playmobil toys.
which is like the little people, except they have opposable legs.
Yeah, so Playmobil is like what happens if Little People and Legos had like some weird merged version of them together. It's like boring Legos.
Offshoot Duplos.
Yeah,
maybe?
like offshoot Duplos. Hype the Time Quest is set in this. It has almost nothing to do with Playmobil besides the figures look like Playmobils. It's set in this like fake medieval world. You play as a knight who is traveling through different time periods to get back to his own time. I'm looking at the box art now for it. Apparently a review from some magazine, which I can barely read the name of the magazine because it's a pixelated box art cover, says the PC's answer to The Legend of Zelda. And all I've got to say to that is it's like Legend of Zelda, but if no one knew what Legend of Zelda was.
Yeah. It's definitely not the PC's answer to The Legend of Zelda.
No.
It is. I don't think it's the answer to any question.
It has surprisingly good reviews for the time, though. GameSpot gave it an 8 out of 10. GameSpy gave it an 80%. IGN gave it a 7.8 out of 10. I don't know who was reviewing this game. It's not that good, but it's a game.
I remember GameSpy and you having to like log in to do anything with stuff.
Yeah.
Like it was like GameSpy was simultaneously like a publishing company, like for like reviews and also it had like the weird like software they had to log in, and it would have like this weird like login where it was like, let's get on with the killing or something.
Yeah, I remember that.
Maybe I'm blending my memories, but anyway, Hype the Time Quest.
Yep. So I'm finally going to try to see the end of that game after only playing the demo for. I probably played that demo like 100 times.
I'm gonna guess that ending is going to be anticlimactic.
Probably.
Just right from the rip. It's gonna end. The credits are gonna roll. And that's it.
And that's going to be a disappointed period of my life.
Hey, you know what? But you'll at least have closure.
That's right.
You'll have closure on something that you've always wanted closure on. It's like when I went back and beat Dragonsphere for the first time. I've now beaten Dragonsphere more than once. But it was all because that EMS extended RAM issue on the computer. We were never able to see the end of Dragonsphere.
Right.
And I was able to complete it, and I was very happy. And then I've beaten it a few times since then.
So Seth, what have you been playing?
So I have been playing a game that had came out after a little while by Telltale, which is a defunct studio. It's in the Walking Dead property, and it's the New Frontier, which is kind of like almost the middle of the series.
Okay.
So there's there's the original Walking Dead. Then they had the Walking Dead 2 sequel. I'm blanking on what the actual name for that was.
So they just call that season 2?
They might have been just season 2.
Yeah.
And then there was The Walking Dead season 3, The New Frontier. And then lastly, there's the final season, which is Walking Dead 4. So it is, it's good. I like the story. I'm a sucker for Telltale story arcs. I loved all their games. I understand that there was some internal company issues with Telltale as a company.
Yeah.
Where they overworked their employees and had these tough deadlines, and it just overall was kind of sometimes came off as rushed products, and the games were a little buggy and all that. And that shows in the New Frontier. And so that it shows, but it's still a good story. I'm halfway through the game, so I'm pretty much halfway through the entire series. I played the first episode. So the Walking Dead series was it was an episodic gaming where the games would come out in chunks. So it'd be like you would subscribe to a season, or you could buy one episode at a time. Usually the first episode came free. It was kind of like a hook to get you in. And then, or at a very discounted rate, and then you would buy the rest of the season, and then over months, the rest of the game would come out.
Right.
It kind of worked. For me, I had some attrition issues where I would really play the first episode, enjoy it, and then just put it down and just never beat it. And it could be like a really good story, and which is what I'm experiencing now, since the New Frontier came out a while ago. Since they have now released another Walking Dead series, and they also have gone defunct. So I mean, they've done some work since New Frontier since I played the original episode 1. And I actually I'm digging the story, and I think I'll finish it up. Probably sometime next week or in a week or so, I'll probably finish it up. They're not super long games. They're generally about 5 hours a chapter. Mm-hmm. So you think 5 hours a chapter, 5 chapters, you get 25 hours for a game. And it's not bad for they do say all your story, all your choices kind of change the game.
Right.
And that's kind of true. So if you're familiar with the Telltale series games, you know that they always say that, but then the story still unfolds the same way that it would if you did all the other choices.
Right.
And it's also interesting. There is some choices that they say that they're trying to give you like big moral choices, and then you see what everybody else did, and it'll be like 90% of the players chose this. I'm like, that's not really a moral choice. You're just either bucking the trend, as it were, deliberately, or you're going with the kind of the obvious choice.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a valid criticism, I think, of that type of game.
Yeah, and I think there are other series and other games that give you better choices and actually change the story. Actually, I just read an article about Mass Effect, and they said that it was like some high 80% of all players went the Paragon route originally, or like their true playthrough.
Yeah.
And the Mass Effect developers were sad because they did a lot of work for the Renegade side.
Oh.
So they're like, no one's really seeing it if everybody's going Paragon. And I'm one of those Mass Effect players for the original trilogy who played through every game twice, one way Paragon, one way Renegade, just to see the different stories. And yes, the game is different if you play as a Renegade versus a Paragon.
That's cool.
And it definitely changes the end of Mass Effect 3 is kind of a decision that you can make regardless of your entire history of playing through the game. But at the end, it does change the whole story of the game, which is, I think, interesting. And I think some other, I feel like Telltale, yes, the choices are kind of dramatic and they time you for your choices, but do they change the story overall? Not really. But so that's what I've been recently been playing.
Well, cool. Well, to get into the meat of our podcast, coming completely different from what Seth's been playing, but I guess there's some similarities to what I've been playing, just because I referenced there was a reference to something that's on this thing. Basically, we're going to be talking about, we talked about the Sega Genesis, we talked about the NES, we talked about the Super Nintendo. So now it's time we get on to the N64, which was the other video game system that we owned besides the Sega Genesis and the NES. We also owned an N64 for a period of time.
It's true. And it's great if the listener reads the show notes, they'll know what we're going to be talking before we talk about it.
That's right.
It's like we don't even have to segue. They just know when we start talking about recently played games. I know you want to segue, but
well, it's good to segue for those listeners who maybe are driving and can't read the show notes.
Oh, that's true. That's true. It's very true.
Anyway, so Seth and I we have a little bit of history with the N64. We had friends who had it, so we got to play it before we owned one for ourselves, and then we ended up getting one for ourselves, and we ended up kind of accruing some games and stuff for it, and having some good memories. But anyway, Seth, what are your memories of the N64?
So my memories of the N64 are the parties that I would do with my friends. So we would go over. I had a friend who I was in middle school, and we would go over to his house, and everybody from the class would go over, and we'd play N64 all night. And that would be GoldenEye, or we'd be playing Super Smash Brothers, or Mario Party, and we would just be going through, and that's all we'd do. We'd start playing as soon as we got there, and we stopped playing when our parents came to pick us up, and it was pretty much an all-night affair. I also had one of my close friends, Matt, had an N64, and I also really remember playing some racing games with him, and as I have some specific games once we get kind of like really into it that I'll go into, but I'm not really a racing game person, but I was, I did when Matt was playing them, I would play them, and I enjoyed it at the time. I was always really bad at them. Matt was very good at them, and I would just crash my car, but that's kind of how life is.
Yeah.
What about you? What are your memories of the N64?
Well, my memories are fairly similar. I mean, I remember playing. We ended up getting a copy of GoldenEye 007. I remember playing that at home. I remember you would always play as Oddjob, and then our father would always play as Mishkin, played by Robbie Coltrane. And I think I always
no, that's Valentine.
Or Valentine, played by Robbie Coltrane, and I always played as Ourumov, I think, who is the Russian, the Russian general. And
you have to turn off the auto aim.
That's right, especially when you're playing as Oddjob. And it was even more fun when you did slappers only, which was no guns, but just your hands. And you did what was the game mode called? I think it was just called License to Kill, where it would be a one-hit kill.
It's one-hit kill, yep.
Yeah,
yep. Or proxy mines.
Proxy mines, yeah, where you can set up little explosives that would just go off when anyone's near. I also remember the game just being a fun single-player game too. I mean, I was a little too young to play or to watch the James Bond movies. I don't know why I was the perfect age to play them, though. But I remember when I eventually did watch GoldenEye, a few years after I had played the game, they did a really good job keeping the game as close to the movie as they could have gotten with with what was available to them. I mean, the settings are almost they match it nearly perfectly, besides being a little lower resolution.
Right. Yeah, and I watched GoldenEye, the movie. and I really enjoyed the movie, and they do a pretty faithful job of retelling the movie in a N64 game, which is, I think, still pretty impressive for them.
So GoldenEye was developed by Rare, which was a software developer for they're a third-party developer that they developed for different Nintendo systems, and I think they later went on to develop for more systems, and eventually they were purchased by Microsoft. But Rare was best known for making games like Donkey Kong Country, and they later made some fighting games like Killer Instinct. They also made a couple of platforming games for the N64, such as Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, and of course they made GoldenEye 007, and then they followed up GoldenEye with what they would call a spiritual successor to GoldenEye, which was Perfect Dark. So Perfect Dark uses an improved version of the GoldenEye engine, and you play as a female spy named Joanna Dark, and you do spy things. But Perfect Dark was cool because it used what was called the N64 expansion pack, which boosted the system's RAM slightly, and it allowed you to actually do two-player co-op for the story mode, which was something that really wasn't around back then for a first-person shooter. And that was kind of a really cool thing to do, is to play this game side by side with a friend, going through the storyline as you would with a normal single player missions.
Right. Yeah, there were not a lot of co-op games at the time that were able to go through like the story together with somebody. There was a lot of multiplayer games.
Yeah.
And a lot of split screen games. And I think that I was just actually looking at just for a little history on the N64. The console was released in North America in 1996, which happened in September, and it was named because it was a 64-bit central processing. It had a 64-bit CPU, and it was the last console to use the cartridge as a primary storage method.
Yeah, the last
until the Switch.
Yeah. Really, the last home console, at least. I mean, the Game Boy Advance used it for a bit, but until the Switch, it was the last.
Yeah, the last thing that you plugged into your TV until the Switch. It was. I mean, Nintendo always has weird formats, I guess, for like even the GameCube. It used a CD, but it always used like these tiny little CDs.
Yes,
and the little teeny ones. It was the fifth generation of gaming system, which its direct competitors were the PlayStation and the Sega Saturn, and the PlayStation did very well, and the Sega Saturn did not.
Yeah, and what was interesting was the reason Nintendo decided to stick with cartridges. It wasn't that they never utilized CDs or rather discs. They'd already developed disc-based programs for their Famicom disk system back in the 80s, and they actually had worked with Sony on developing a potential Super Nintendo CD add-on, which was canceled and later became the PlayStation. Yes. Essentially what it boiled down to was CDs at the time were just not they weren't fast enough for what Nintendo wanted to do, and that has a point to it. I mean, while the PlayStation has really good audio and some pretty good visuals, there is load times with PlayStation games because of it being a CD base.
Load times.
Yeah. So cartridges are instant. There was no load times that really to speak of. I mean, there's some, but they're always consistent. You don't have to worry about the CD skipping or anything like that. The cartridge, you pop it in and it's good to go as long as it's clean. And so while they weren't able to get CD quality music on most of their games without sacrificing, different things, they were still able to produce games that were quick and that could load as quickly as possible and not have people having to worry about wait times. That was what they were worried about.
Yeah, and I think that it did. Sega Saturn eventually morphed into the Dreamcast, and the Dreamcast was the last of the Sega systems. But so obviously the successful ones were the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation, which have now are iterated out into the Nintendo Switch and the PlayStation 5 coming out.
Yeah, right around the corner.
The Nintendo 64 launched with 3 games, 2 that were released in North America, and then one was exclusively to Japan. The 2 games that came out with it were Super Mario 64, which is a staple, and everyone should be aware of it if you're familiar with the 64, and Pilot Wings 64.
Yeah.
And Pilot Wings was an interesting game that I feel like it was fun, but a lot of it came from people played with it because they only had 2 games.
Yeah.
They bought an N64, they brought it home, they had 2 games, Mario 64 and Pilot Wings, so they played Mario 64 and loved it, and then they were like, all right, let's try this Pilot Wings game, and it's a fun game. You play as these pilots who have to land gliders into like a landing zone after getting like different rings. Like there's like these rings that you have to fly through, and then there's a land, and you have to land like perfectly in the spot, and you get these different classes of vehicles. You're flying like a glider or a gyrocopter, and it like slowly falls to the earth, and you have to kind of use different like going down and going up to kind of gain air time and stuff like that. And there's also like you can get a rocket belt, and it was interesting. The characters that were in it were pretty interesting looking too. They were very cartoony, very exaggerated.
Yeah,
and it was developed and published by Nintendo. I think mostly for probably a kind of proof of concept type of situation, and it was one of the original one of the 3 launch titles. The title that was released solely in Japan, I'm going to is translated to The Strongest Habu Shoji.
Oh.
And it's a virtual board game for the Nintendo 64, and it was published by Sega, and it was one of the original launch games, and it was the only launch game to use the controller pack. And the game's special guest is the shogi player Yoshira Habu, who won all 7 major shogi championships of the game's release. So he's a person who is so the game was a shogi game, which is a board game.
Yeah, it's similar to like it's in the same family as like chess.
So you got Mario 64, Pilot Wings, and chess.
That's right. 3 very different games. I mean,
extremely different games.
Yeah. For anyone who's never played Mario 64, it's the plumber's first jump into 3D, and it's very, very good. I mean, it still holds up to this day, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really perfects 3D movement and 3D camera work, which was a wholly new concept when this game came out. I mean, people had really no idea how to make these games in 3D, and they essentially perfected what became a standard for 3D platformers for a period of time. And people would copy the design for years to come. And Nintendo still basically uses the same kind of logic in building their games with like Mario Odyssey.
Yeah, even Mario Odyssey, Super Mario Galaxy, Super Mario Sunshine. All of these games are very similar to it's just Super Mario 64 with better, like newer graphics and a different story.
Yeah,
but it sales same core gameplay. And they actually in the HTC Vive store, there is different areas that you can use as like your home, as it were. Uh-huh. And one of the homes that you can download for free from the workshop that somebody did was the entirety of Super Mario 64 in VR. So you can go to every world in Mario 64 in VR
cool.
experience the game in VR.
Oh, nice.
It's not really playable per se, but it's definitely interesting going into that world from the eyes of Mario.
Yes.
Yeah. That where it's using high fidelity VR graphics, and it's very interesting. I recommend it if you have a VR equipment. Just go to the workshop, and you should be able to see the Super Mario 64 rebuild for the home. And it's not a game; it's just like a kind of place that you can hang out in. But it's still really, really cool.
Nice.
I think it's kind of cool.
Well, keeping along in the idea of moving 2D staples over to 3D. The N64 was also where Nintendo decided to make the leap with Zelda and launched The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, which is another game.
Ocarina?
Oh, yeah, Ocarina.
I call it Ocarina.
Yeah.
Ocarina. Wouldn't you say that too? Because aren't you from Boston?
Ocarina. So, yes. In any case, Ocarina of Time is one of those games like Super Mario 64 that still holds up very well to this day. It is a full-on 3D adventure action game. You play as Link. You go back in time or into the future and back into the past, and you travel around this massive world, 3D world in a very almost open world type of setting. It wasn't open world as we know it today. It wasn't like Grand Theft Auto open world, but it was open world enough that it felt like you could do really whatever you wanted in that game. For that type of game in that time.
And you could do different missions, not necessarily in the order that was like you could go do the the Goron world, to the Goron world before you help out the fish people, the Zora people.
There's certain missions you can do in different orders.
In different orders, exactly.
Yeah.
And then it was also a big puzzler, and so there was a lot of different puzzle aspects to it. There were music puzzles that you had to solve using your ocarina, and that you could teleport around to the game and be able to, like Zach said, go to the future and the past. And it came out in '98, and so that was one of the earlier. So 2 years after the N64 came out, they hit the Nintendo. Hit the field with Legends of Zelda, and then in 2000 they released Majora's Mask, which was a sequel, which was a lot more in tune to like time manipulation as well.
Yes,
but that one was like where Majora's Mask was like the Legend of Zelda, Groundhog Day. So you just like you repeat the same couple of days over and over and over again, trying to do different things as you try to get to the perfect end, or as you try to accomplish the goals that are set before you.
Yeah. And for some brief history on Majora's Mask, it was developed originally, I believe the intention was to create a game for there was a Japanese only disc-based add-on for the N64. And they originally wanted to create kind of a Master Quest or a harder version of Ocarina of Time. And so while there's development of that, they're planning a different project kind of as what would become Majora's Mask. And when the N64 DD, the disk drive, didn't do as well, they decided to transition over to a cartridge-based game. And eventually it got the North American release.
Yes, and the 64 DD was a big disk drive that went under the N64.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a CD player, if like for a car. It's very bulky.
Yes, and it would sit under the carriage of the N64, raising it up, and it got delayed, and it just did not do well.
I do know that a version of the N64 DD was planned for North American release. They actually got as far as developing what would have been the demo model, so not the like prototype test models and like not the development kits, but the actual like piece that would have gone and sat in stores and stuff like that to demo the system. But they never brought any of the games over to it. So the only reason I know that exists is there's a YouTuber named Metal Jesus who actually stumbled upon one kind of by chance and has it in his collection. It's one of the only ones in existence.
So during this time, Pokemon was on the rise, and they did release a few Pokemon games for the N64. There was Pokemon Snap and Pokemon Stadium. And Pokemon Stadium, I believe you could plug your game in somehow to the game, and you could import your characters into the game, and you could fight them with your friends for the first time on a big screen. You could always fight by using the link cable, as it were, with the Game Boys. But there was some aspect where you could bring your Pokemon from your Pokemon game into the stadium to then fight your friends. So that was very exciting. And Pokemon fighting is kind of like the coolest things, especially for kids who grew up with Pokemon. More so maybe Zach than I. I was a red-blue Pokemon guy and then kind of drifted out from that. But Pokemon Snap was a on-rail photograph game where you would ride through on a little cart and you try to get good photographs of the Pokemon like a safari.
Yeah.
And you would try to use different things, like you'd throw a Pokeball at them, or you would throw carrots or something at them to get them to do some apples. Yeah, you peg them with apples, and they would do stuff, and then you would take a picture after you threw the apple, and you were trying to score points, and the more points you got, the more courses you unlocked, and you would be able to take and you'd be able to take more photographs of different Pokemon, and there'd maybe be a few seconds where a rare Pokemon would show up on the screen, and you have to play the map over and over and over and over and over again to be able to try and see it, because that's what Pokemon games end up being, kind of grindy. But
it did have some
how it is.
It did have some cool moments. I know that there was ways to unlock. One of the ways you unlocked levels to get to the next level is you had to there's one instance where you had to throw something at a wall, and then a Porygon would pop out and hit a button, and then it would divert you onto a different path, and that would be how you unlock one of the later levels. So there's some cool little kind of not almost puzzly solving elements to it,
Right.
It definitely kept you a little more entertained than just taking photos.
Right. It was definitely a puzzly game as well.
And all of these characters and more were included in a crossover fighting game, which was developed by HAL, called Super Smash Brothers. The first being on the N64 and a sequel on the GameCube, and since then there's been a version on every Nintendo system ever made.
Right. And it's become memes and all of that.
Yes. So Smash Brothers was really cool. The guy who actually was the creator of Kirby, Masahiro Sakurai, and one of the developers at HAL Laboratory, was really interested in making a fighting game, and his initial idea was it was just going to be essentially just generic fighters fighting each other, and he showed it to Satoru Iwata, who was working at Nintendo, and they kind of both decided that it would be interesting if they did something more with this game, and they wanted a way to show it to Nintendo and have them be interested in it. So they actually put Mario and Donkey Kong and Samus and stuff in it, having
which would be all of their intellectual properties.
Yeah, fighting with each other, but they never got approval from anyone else in Nintendo to do this. So he showed them this demo that he created with these characters fighting and punching each other, pretty much anticipating that Nintendo was gonna everyone else in Nintendo was gonna just shoo it down, and it was approved. They said, yeah, let's go for it, and they went on to develop the game. And it's really cool. The original game, was very simple. It only has a few characters in it, and some unlockable characters such as Ness from Earthbound or Luigi. But it was a fun little game. You got to play as some of your favorite characters and beat them up. Right. It's one of the few games where you could play as Mario and punch Pikachu right in the face.
Yeah, no, it was up to, yeah, 4 combatants at one time, and there was a limited. The original Super Smash Brothers had the only 12 playable races, if 12 playable characters
Yeah.
from the, yeah, different aliens, right? Just
Yeah,
Kirby, you
Yeah.
have Kirby or Earthbound guy, Ness, and all those guys together, and those 12 playable characters, and would duke it out. And it was interesting seeing Mario fighting Star Fox, fighting Samus, fighting Link, fighting Pikachu, and all of that,
Yeah.
all at once, kind of a thing. And it also brought brought people who, like, maybe didn't know the Earthbound series, but you might have gotten interested because you saw Ness or something in Super Smash Brothers, and you're like, who's this guy? There's only 12 characters, so who's important? Who's this guy who's important enough to Nintendo to show into this game? And the game came out in '99, and it became a commercial success for them with 5 million copies worldwide by 2001.
Yeah, and it keeps going, as mentioned, to this day.
Yes, yeah. So then, I think every platform they release a different Smash, as it were, and it's just a great. And they add more and more characters as they have more and more characters to add, and it's usually all Nintendo property characters from the I know, or at least Nintendo. Like, I know Pokemon's Game Freak, but still, like, Nintendo's got some involvement in there. So most, yeah, characters that are on Nintendo products. And then there is a game that I really enjoyed playing. This is the one with Matt. It was the Cruising the USA series of games, and the Cruising series was actually developed by Midway Games, who were they weren't they were arcade makers. So they developed and made arcade cabinets, and they essentially made Cruisin' the USA in 1994, and they released it for arcades. And when the N64 came out, it was really taking a chunk, and the SNES and the NES, all these home consoles, year after year, were taking a chunk out of Midway's pocket, as it were, because Midway had the arcade cabinets, and people weren't going to arcades because they had an arcade in their home. So Midway was like, well, why don't we just take our property and port it to the N64? And they ported the Cruis'n the USA series games onto the N64, and I was able to play that with my good friend Matt, and it was unique because you play in streets that were kind of real life, but there were, like, road hazards such as, like, oncoming traffic or construction, and there was other cars, and you can bang into them or jump over them. And you could drive a bus instead of, like, all just, like, you think like Forza series racing games, and you're just driving like souped up racing cars. Matt's probably like being like, what the hell are you talking about, Seth, with souped up racing cars? But with Cruis'n the USA, you're driving like beaters, and like I always drove as the bus. That's what I did. I drove as the school bus, and my job was to slam into as many cars as possible so that Matt could win, because I wasn't going to win. Like, I knew, like, just from the beginning, I was like, oh, I'm not good at racing games, and I don't win. So that was my job, was to just do it. And then the Cruis'n series there was Cruis'n USA, which was the first one, Cruis'n the World, and then Cruis'n Exotica, and then Cruis'n Velocity, which came out on the Game Boy Advance. And apparently Cruis'n Blast is... I'm just looking at the release timelines on... I think Cruis'n Blast is back to the arcade cabinets. And... yeah, 2017 by it is by Midway, but Midway went defunct in 2010. So I think it's just an updated Cruisin' Blast. And then the Fast and Furious arcade cabinets came from the Cruisin' series. And yep. So the main three were Cruisin' USA, Cruisin' Exotica, Cruisin' Worlds, and Cruisin' Exotica, which were released 94, 96, and 2000. And they were just set in different locations. And like Cruisin' Exotica, you ended up racing on Mars. So like it's kind of, the games kind of got farther, like just crazier and crazier in regards to the courses.
So I think for now that's going to wrap it up for the N64 episode. We will definitely return to it. The N64 has a massive library of games, most of which I still play to this day. So honestly, I might mention one in my like recently played at this point.
Yeah, we don't want to go on forever, which we could with N64.
We definitely could. But for now, I think we're just going to go right into our Buy Wait Pass segment. Seth, I started with the games I've recently been playing. Do you want to take it away for your Buy Wait Pass?
Sure, yeah. So my Buy Wait Pass, I actually went through the Steam store and I was looking for games, and I like to try and just find games that I may not necessarily find throughout my discovery, and that I'm just searching for actual games that are unique to me or new to me. And I found a game called The Murder Mystery Machine, and it's from the description, a compelling interactive mystery game that crosses unique puzzle solving and deduction gameplay with a narrative that questions the very nature of justice. And it's coming soon. And you play as a cop, and you have to solve murders, I guess. And you have like there's like you're like interviewing suspects. You're having flow charts of like who did what with like this person has a relationship with this person, and you're trying to discover like the who, the where, the when, as the police often do. And it's using like a isometric type of view where you're like wandering around the zone that you're in, and you're just trying to find clues as you search the thing. So I picked this game because I knew it was something that, I don't know, it looks fun. It looks like something that I would probably enjoy, but I don't know if I would necessarily buy it personally. I think I'll put it on my pass list, but I will put it on my wish list. And if it comes out and it shows up, who knows? I've bought games that I didn't plan on buying and enjoyed them, and I've bought games that I really was excited about buying and did not enjoy them. So who knows? But I'm gonna put it on a pass, and if it comes out and goes out, if it comes out and I don't play it, I don't think I would be missing out. But if you like murder mystery, if you like detective games and solving mysteries, maybe you should put it on your list. And I think that it could be a fun game.
Cool.
So, what about you?
Well, so the game that I have on my Buy Wait Pass, and I unfortunately do not know when it's going out because I can't find any detail on anticipated launch times. But it's a game called Witchbrook, and it's developed by Chucklefish. So Chucklefish is the company.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they created Starbound, and they also published and helped work on Stardew Valley. So Witchbrook is supposed to be like a Stardew Valley kind of like Harry Potter Hogwarts game, whereas from what we know about the game, from what's been shown, you appear to be a magic user, like a witch or a wizard, who's attending a magic school, and you do different tasks around the school, and you make friends, and I assume you do other Stardew Valley stuff, probably trade things and create relationships and such. I love Stardew Valley, and I love just the idea of kind of like an open like Harry Potter Hogwarts style game. So it's definitely a game that I'm going to be keeping my eye out for, as I have no idea when it's supposed to be out. It
says, according to an article, 2022.
Oh, okay. So
I believe my knowledge with Chucklefish is that he is pretty much was a one-man show for a majority of Stardew. He did all Stardew by himself, released it. It became much more successful than he thought it would ever be. And he has now just recently hired somebody, or had a job posting to hire somebody to help him. Not necessarily with Witchbrook, but with helping keeping Stardew Valley up to date, as well as while he works on Witchbrook, because I think he does all the art by himself. He does all the programming by himself. He goes by the I think he's just maybe Chucklefish. He's like a little bear for his icon for for the for Twitter and stuff like that. He really great guy. I'm very excited about Witchbrook as well. I would also put that on a buy. For myself.
It'll definitely be on a buy for me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that's that's it for this episode. So you can listen to us, support us, and contact us in many different ways. You can listen to us on wherever podcasts are served. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Castbox, Over something, and all different stuff. Google Podcast. Everything is. If there's something that you listen to podcasts on and we're not on there, feel free to listen to us. We do update our podcast every Sunday. We do not update our YouTube every Sunday. So if you listen to us on podcast services, you will hear us first on your podcast service because we update every Sunday.
And then you'll hear us.
Eventually on YouTube if you really want to, but we're just there because we need to be there, I guess. You can support us by listening to us and liking things, subscribing to things.
Or you can also visit our website, classicgamingbrothers.com. We have a store. If you feel so inclined, you can purchase a t-shirt or you can purchase a mug, and who knows, you might be able to purchase more stuff. We haven't decided.
Yes, you can at least purchase a t-shirt and a mug, and there will be other people who are not us who will make it and ship it to you. Yeah. In fact, please try and get the right size t-shirt, because then it's just a pain in the butt because we use random people to do it. You can contact us by sending us an email at classicgamingbrothers@gmail.com. That's a way you can send feedback. You can also mosey on over to the Classic Gaming Brothers Lounge at www.classicgamingbrothers.com, and you can go to the contact section of the website and use that form and send us feedback. We like feedback. We like negative feedback and we like positive feedback, because we like to make sure that the audio quality and all the content is what you want to listen to.
Yeah.
We've gotten different feedback for different ways of doing things, and we actually are planning on changing things up soonish in regards to how we what different topics. So we'll try different topics, and if you guys like a certain topic, we'll keep going down that route. We're still going to talk about video games, but you'll see. It's fun. It's always fun. So send stuff in, and remember, don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Zach.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
We have!
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. Oh, man. That was good.
That was good. That was good.
We should just roll the music. I like how we said that was good in the podcast. Okay, now you can roll the music.